this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
From Regina Capel.
After 9 years of NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. And Canadians are suffering. And the Liberals look around the country and they see tent cities popping up in our communities. They see millions lining up at food banks and families falling further and further into debt. And what do they think is the cause of all these problems? That Canadians aren't paying enough in taxes. That must be why they've already hiked the carbon tax 5 times and why they're going to hike it to 61 cents a litre. How can making everything more expensive provide any relief for Canadians?
Exactly. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am glad that the Conservatives are finally talking about the economy because it gives me a chance to highlight some good economic news we've had. Last week, we learned that inflation in August was at 2%. In fact, for all of this year, inflation has been within Bank of Canada's target range. That means interest rates are coming down. Meanwhile, wages have been outpacing inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't like to talk about that because good news for Canadians is bad news.
Yeah, exactly.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
She can tell all the people lining up at food banks that they've never had it so good, and she knows that prices are not coming down. She also knows that her carbon tax won't stop a single forest fire or flood. They've admitted that. So Canadians get the brutal double whammy of all the extra costs associated with natural disasters, plus the carbon tax on top of it. And now the NDP leader is trying to pull off another stunt. He's trying to fool Canadians that he's got some new position on the carbon tax. In reality, he loves it. He's voted for it 24 times. If they're so sure that Canadians love their carbon tax, why don't they take it to the Canadian people and let them decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, all these Conservatives know how to do is talk Canada down. And you know why that is? It's because they don't want Canadians to ask themselves what the Conservatives really stand for. That's because the Conservatives have a hidden agenda. They have a hidden austerity agenda. And it is time for us all to ask ourselves, what would they cut? Would they cut childcare? I think so. Would they cut dental care? I think so. Would they cut our housing plan? There she would.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
It's Canadians who are cutting back as they've seen their paychecks devalued and prices skyrocket. But it's not just the carbon tax that the NDP and Liberals are hiking. The new tax hike that the government is announcing today will hit the middle class hard. In the middle of a housing crisis, they're raising taxes on carpenters and roofers. In fact, the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations said this, quote, "The capital gains increase will discourage the construction of new rental homes for Canadians." Why is the government's response to the housing crisis punishing the people who actually build the homes?
Right. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really glad to hear the Conservatives talk about housing because last week we made a very important announcement on housing. Last week we announced that amortizations for first-time home buyers and everyone buying new builds will be extended to 30 years. That is going to help young Canadians make the dream of home ownership a reality, and it will get more homes built faster. And I am shocked that the Conservatives are opposed to this essential measure.
Here's how bad the carbon tax has driven up inflation in food costs in Toronto. The Daily Bread Food Bank says their monthly usage has gone from 60,000 to 350,000 people per month. That's a 480% increase. Pre-COVID, they spent $1.5 million per year on food. Today, $29 million. Their only solution is to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Instead, why don't we have a carbon tax election so Canadians can decide?
The Honourable Member for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity once again today to talk about what's up, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what's up. Women's participation in the workforce is way has reached a record high. New childcare spots are being built, and that means 250,000 new spaces by 2026, Mr. Speaker. We know the Conservatives would like to cut these programs, but on this side of the House, we will fight for Canadians.
The honourable member from Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
The Liberals will make you think you've never had it so good, despite millions of Canadians having to line up at a food bank every month. And we just don't know how many more facts they need to see about how damaging the carbon tax really is. The trucking industry says it adds $4 billion a year. Farmers are going to pay $1 billion more in carbon taxes, and food banks in every part of this country are seeing skyrocketing use. And their own budget documents say it blows a hole of about $35 billion at least in the economy. Again, if they're so confident, call an election and let Canadians decide on the carbon tax for themselves.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Interest rates are down, inflation is down, gas prices are down, and pollution is down, Mr. Speaker. Pollution levels are at their lowest level in 25 years, Mr. Speaker. What we've achieved is the equivalent of removing from our roads 69 million cars less pollutions for Canadians, for our kids, all across the country. We're fighting for climate change. We're fighting for Canadians. We're fighting for a better future for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, everyone knows taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and pretty soon time's going to be up for these corrupt Liberals. We all remember a couple of weeks ago where a brave steelworker confronted the Prime Minister and said taxes are killing him, and he doesn't believe a single word the Prime Minister has to say. And yet, the NDP keeps propping up this unpopular government. Why? Because their leader wants to keep his pension. Why is this NDP Liberal government so intent on raising the carbon tax and reducing workers' pay?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, for all the Canadians watching at home, they will know what's up, Mr. Speaker. It's investment in the future of this country, Mr. Speaker. Under this Liberal government, investment is up in decarbonization to make sure that our steel mill would be productive, to make sure that our steel workers would have a job, to make sure that Canada would win in the economy of the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know that what's up is to make sure that this government continues, that we make sure that we invest in them, and we build the Canada of the 21st century.
Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this high-flying, jet-setting Prime Minister who's off to New York to...
I'm sorry. The honourable member has a voice that carries, but I'm still having difficulty hearing his voice. If I could ask members, please. If I could ask all members, please, to have either quiet conversations or so that we can the chair can hear the answer. The honourable member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Island Rideau Lakes from the top, please.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for this jet-setting, high-flying Prime Minister who's off to New York City to dine with elites while doubling costs for Canadians. While he's there, maybe he could check out the $9 million condo that he got for his media buddy, Tom Clark. They could share a coffee from this $5,000 coffee machine or work on their golf swing at the golf simulator paid for by Canadians. And maybe the Prime Minister can save us a couple of bucks and bunk with his buddy, Tom Clark, at this $9 million condo on Billionaires Row.
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Canada undertakes very important work representing Canada at home and abroad. And for example, this week in New York, he has spoken at the
The Honourable Minister, I'll invite him to start from the top, please.
The Conservatives might have been more comfortable, Mr. Speaker, if I began with a bad poem. However, The Prime Minister undertakes very important work on behalf of Canada at home and abroad. And for example, this week in New York, Mr. Speaker, not only is he speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, but he's also leading and co-hosting the Summit of the Future, talking about key global challenges on sustainable development, international peace and security, technical innovation, digital coordination, decarbonization and clean energy, and human rights. Now, I do appreciate nobody over there appears to care about any of those things, but they are important to Canadians.
Right. The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Since 2015, violent crime has surged by 50%. Shockingly, sex assaults by 74%. Today, the parole board inexcusably granted day parole to a serial rapist who still poses a risk to drug, manipulate, and coerce victims. Let that sink in. This is not keeping Canadians safe. Who on that Liberal bench approves of this?
The honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows very well that the parole board by law operates independently from the government. Our responsibility is to ensure that the appropriate men and women serve on the parole board, something we have done with great seriousness. They know that the most important criteria in terms of an independent decision made by this quasi-judicial tribunal is public safety. My colleague knows that very well, and he should be careful not to increase public cynicism in a way that doesn't serve public safety. He knows very well that's incorrect.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the United Nations is arguing that UNRWA employees who participated in the October 7th terrorist massacre are immune from legal action. This is a day which saw 7 Canadians murdered. Let me rephrase that. They're arguing that individuals who contributed to the rape, the murder, and the kidnapping are outside and above the law. So I have a simple question for this government. Do they support immunity for terrorists? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Speaker, Canada is committed to ensuring that our humanitarian assistance aligns with Canadian values and international standards of neutrality. We take any allegations of misconduct very seriously. Upon learning of allegations from UNRWA about some of its staff, Canada was the first country to take action and pause all additional funding pending thorough investigations by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services and an independent review led by former French Minister Catherine Colonna. But it is very rich, Mr. Speaker, for that member to talk about anything to do with the UN, because she would face down her party that wants to quit the UN. A founding member is in Canada.